was the ability to think of Angel Island just on the other side.
What the other deep questions I'm going to actually ask to our participants. Were you?
Oh, no, no.
Okay. Our participants, but before I do that, we want to open the mic to those of you who are attending here to ask some questions of our panelists too. So I'm going to turn this mic. We don't have a wander around the place mic, so I'm going to turn this mic facing this way. We have one? Holy moly, we have a mic. I'm sorry, I didn't know we did. Okay, now, I have 2 student interns, and I will bet one of them can be a mic holder who takes the mic around to people who have questions they want to address to our panel. And this is Callie Tompkins. She is an intern in Peace Studies at the University of New Mexico. This is her last semester, and I have the good fortune to have her working with me as an intern. There's her fellow intern, Michael Rose. I'm blanking on your last name, and I know it. Raymer. I'm Raymer. I know that. It's my brain damage. It does this all the time. In any case, they are both making it possible for us to do what we're doing here. So, okay. Questions?
This week, Senator Heinrich is crowing about how wonderful it is that the defense money has been increased. How wonderful it is for New Mexico. Every single congressional district in the country has military jobs, and jobs is what keeps people willing to go along with war. And I wonder if the Peace Studies is doing anything about publicizing and training people to understand that conversion to life-affirming and peaceful economy would be better than a war economy.
That's a very good question, and that's still a work in progress for us. Throughout our educational program, we have students cover all of those issues in terms of racism, materialism, consumerism, sustainability. Problematically, we have a university that doesn't really support what we're trying to do. They think that this is still just a very, quote-unquote, hippie operation, you know, which is inflammatory in itself. But I'm trying to get them to understand that this is about a public good. This is about society and what we do for society, and the fact that they create institutional programs or plans that make our work even more difficult in that sense. And so we have classes where we talk about nuclear proliferation. Sooner or later, we'll be able to incorporate something that deals with militarism and the security industrial complex in that sense, with all the weapons productions, mass weapons of mass production, WMD in that sense. However, you know, with the current budget crisis in New Mexico right now, they've cut our program back to where I can only hire 2 instructors a semester. I can't teach any other topics classes. I can only teach core classes. And so we're hamstrung, but we're doing the best that we can as we move forward with this. And in fact, we don't even have a major just yet. It's just a minor and a certificate program. I do want to open up the certificate program to community members so that people can, you know, take 9 credit hours, and not that they need a certificate, but it's empowering. It's a union card in some ways to do some of this other work within communities and outside the universities. So the more partners that we have, the better off it is for us in that sense. But we're getting there. Right now, I'm trying to help them understand that this is not about debate, but this is about discussion. This is about, you know, dialogue, and we have to have a dialogue for this crisis of consciousness that's infecting us all. So I'm trying to blend it all in many unique ways by showing that, you know, this is related to economics, it's related to sociology, it's related to psychology, it's related to architecture, it's related to everything. Because if we don't have peace, we can't have anything else really in place. But I thank you for that support, and believe me, we're going to keep pushing that.
And I think we all know in New Mexico we bear a special responsibility because of our various military bases and Los Alamos and Sandia, which are the little engine that keeps New Mexico financially afloat, which is why our delegation has never seen a bomb project they didn't like, or another thing that could be done on a military base they didn't like. And the only people they are really answerable to, other than those who pay for their campaigns, is us New Mexicans. And sometimes I think we've gotten so used to it that we've gotten used to being bomb central. And so we don't necessarily react sometimes as much as we should. I mean, some of us do, and I do sometimes. But think of it. How often do we hear that there's yet another plan to expand something at Sandia or Los Alamos and say, oh, well, what can you do?
Rosemary, can I say one other thing to that
Yeah.
also too? You know, this is part of this overall process as to why we're trying to do strategic peace-building education. One of the things that's happened is that corporations have basically taken over universities, and so they're putting their agenda in, and the universities follow that agenda for the most part. So what we're seeing right now is a decrease in liberal arts education all across the country. Liberal arts has been just kind of wiped out in many ways, and so what they're substituting is STEM, so they can continue on with this notion of creating jobs, you know, not this green-friendly jobs or anything else. So we've got to change the mindset of many different colleagues and administrators and other people also do, but more than that, the community, letting them know that education is a public good and not a private good. So we depend on the community to have these voices with administrators and talk to them and say, hey, this is our tax dollars, this is what we want out of the system, not this other stuff that you're giving us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I speak to that a little bit? Can I speak to that just a little bit?
Yes, you please.
So one thing that I just wanted to add to that is our student body. I think having education that is actually inspiring and brings a call to action to students to stand up and actually recognize the rights abuses that we're seeing around the world, or injustice or inequality. And so I think that goes to show that I think there's a place for and there's a need for more education, whether it even be starting in high school, which I know Sarah's around here. Sarah Wilkinson also runs a great program in engaging students to sort of to be engaged in social justice, and that's something that our program really focuses on. And I think it's a real sign of hope for me every single year when we have students. We have about 30 students every year, and I can't tell you how many of them walk away from the class really changed and completely changing their career paths. And I was one of those students. I was a student in the project that I coordinate now, and I studied psychology, didn't know what I was going to do, met refugees, and found a real passion for social justice after that. But it wasn't until then. So we just watched a film about the Rwandan genocide, and now the students are they were very, very young, if they were even born when the Rwandan genocide happened, and so they're confronting these international inequalities head on, not only from a textbook, but then they go out and they work with families and they see what racism looks like hand to hand. They see what it looks like to have an African family go to the management at their apartment complex and get an answer that they're going to be evicted. Then they go with a white student and they get a different answer. So those things, we see it every single year, and we see systemic racism and purposeful barriers that refugees face in accessing local resources. And so I just wanted to add that point, that I think what you brought up is really good, that we need to be questioning the United States' role in all of this. But also, I just want to add that inspiring our youth to actually to stand up for social justice is a tricky question, and I think one important way to do that is in dialogue, just engaging students in dialogue with those communities that are most affected by oppression. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And my question is about textbooks for the education, because as I understand, there's much that's been changed in our textbooks about our history. And I feel that this is a big problem about how we're educating our students with the wrong kinds of information, and what can we do about getting textbooks back into realities that are needed to be understood.
Were they ever?
Here's an idea, because I agree with you. I think the textbooks are terrible in many ways, and they don't subscribe to what John Dewey said about social justice and education, or Maria Montessori, or Paulo Freire, or anyone else in that sense. But we do know that a great many of our textbooks come from Texas. Not to pick on Texas, you know. But the thing that worries me the most is that, as I've told you before, I see that this notion of white supremacy and the lost cause of the South has been surfacing in textbooks and other types of things. And this is the way students are learning, in between being learning to take tests all the time. They're not learning anything else. But the information they do get is skewed in that sense. This is where the public comes in hand in terms of who do we elect to the school boards, being part of the democratic process. The one example that sticks out of my mind the most is like when Bill Richardson was governor, I was appointed to be on the textbook review committee for the state of New Mexico. And we were told to look for diversity and multiculturalism. And so we met with many book vendors to look at the books and things and guide them. We had our worksheets. But at the bottom of one of our worksheets, there was this little line that says, the textbooks in New Mexico can have no more than 10% multicultural content. And we said, 10%? What the heck does that mean? You know, and I thought, if this is an administrative rule, then people need to know about this, you know, and it's still in the books, but it's probably still being practiced. So how do we get that rule off the books so that we can get more information that's about diversity, equity, and justice and fairness, and teach our youth very early on. So it's another big job, but it's for those of us who are faculty at the university, we owe it to the citizens of the state and others to pick the right type of textbooks and things that work best for teaching about social justice, equity, and fairness. And it's not always met with a lot of friendliness with our colleagues also, too. But that's okay. You know, we can handle that. But the issue is, we've had some blowback. I'm a former faculty senator for the University of New Mexico. And when I was a faculty senator, during my last 2-year term, we had faculty members who said they wanted to pass a resolution to say that UNM faculty should not teach about oppression, not talk about gender issues, and not talk about racism, get rid of the First Amendment. And I thought, oh, heck no. This is not happening. And we fought against it and got it banned and pushed aside. But we still had a faculty senate president and others who wanted to say, look, well, let's revisit this. Like, no, we voted on it. It's dead. It's over with. Let it go. You know, we need to move forward with this. There is a group called FIRE. I don't remember I just remember the acronym right now. But they rated UNM as being too liberal. And I thought, like, really? You know, as being too liberal because we invited certain guests, other types of things. But they gave us a bad report card based upon their ideological standards for keeping American exceptionalism and manifest destiny and other things in place. So it's a tough job, but it's fun. I mean, where else can I go and speak of this stuff and really sort of, you know, I don't know. It is fun. I mean, and that's why I enjoy it, because I'm working for social justice, and I have to have a passion for it. But I'm going to keep pushing that agenda also, too. In fact, I recommended today to students, they were having a bake sale on campus with young Republicans and others, and they had the value of cookies placed at different prices for minorities and other people and everything. And two of the students from different groups came crying and what have you. And I was like, okay, look, I'm going to show you some tough love right now. If you want to work for social justice, you got to get used to this. It's always out there. Don't take it personally, you know. But how do you get your thinking to be in parallel, in concert with your feelings, so that your motivation can be of one to bring about change and not just being stuck, you know, in fight or flight in many ways. You know, and so it's tough. But I recommended that she read, for a starter, The People's History of America by Howard Zinn. And I said, when you finish that, then we can go to other things and we can start having some dialogues and start talking about these things. But there's a few pockets of resistance at UNM. We're the outliers, and we're the bad boys and bad girls. But we wear that with a badge of honor also, too, because we stand up for justice and compassion. So let me stop. So.
Okay. And I would encourage us all to know what's in the textbooks in our children's or grandchildren's schools, or even in the schools that, you know, even if you have a school that's nearby. It's important that this not be all happening under the surface. And when you encounter good curriculum, good lessons online, there's so much that's online and free, and we really need to share it with our children's and grandchildren's teachers and say, this is another side of this you could put on. I'm thinking I think it was in Texas that a mother looked at the history or economics book that her child had, and it described slavery as a form of immigration related to work. And the mother had a fit. And ultimately, that was not the way slavery was described in the books used by that school anymore, although it was an approved textbook. It was Texas. So the thing is, but what if the daughter had not brought it to the mother? How long could that have been used before anybody would have known? My God, this book says that slavery was a form of economic migration to work. So we can't assume somebody else is minding the store. Is, I guess, the truth of it. Yes, Robbie.
So, very quickly, was that 10% in content in textbooks rule reversed or removed? Or?
To be quite honest, I have not had the chance to really sort of push it. But it's still a pet peeve of mine, and I think to myself, one of these days I need to talk to some folks and see how we can undo that. But it needs to change, and I think under the present governor right now, we probably have a very difficult time trying to change that.
And a lot of these things that you were talking about in terms of resistance or the Senate trying to revisit certain progress that you had made and stuff, it seems to me that the feeling that was behind not allowing children to learn Spanish or speak only English, that type of feeling may be behind some of these things that you fought against. Is that, would you agree with that?
I think there is a dislike of the other that is taking place. And people have it in their minds that, again, this is all part of supremacist ideology. If I believe that I'm superior to someone else, then they're inferior. Therefore, they must be subordinated, and I must control them in every aspect of their lives. But when people stand up and resist and show that they're human beings and they show their human capabilities, it frightens them because they built up this image that, like, well, I thought you were inferior. However, I'm seeing that you're very capable of doing X, Y, Z, and even surpassing me on this. So it creates another emotional fear in those folks to maintain and control their power, what power it is that they do have in that sense. So again, it's about bringing all the peoples to the tables and saying, let's have an open, honest dialogue. Let's act like adults. And maybe even the children can guide us some ways also, too, in that regard. But it should be an inclusive thing. And again, as I said, I think this is, I have to believe this at my age now. You know, I'm in my mid-60s, and I have to believe that this phenomenon that we're experiencing is on the wane and it's dying out. And it may not happen for another 10 years, it may not happen for another 50 years, but it's going to happen. You know, because with this millennial generation that I see now, I haven't seen anything like this since the 60s. I'm like, I am so supercharged by the fact that they want to work for justice and other types of things. But as elders in the community now, we have an obligation and a responsibility to mentor them and say, okay, look, you know, some of the old ideas we had didn't work, but if you got some new ideas, here's some of the frameworks and models and ideas and practical things that we can look at and work and build something together. Because, I often tell the students, what kind of world do you want your children and your grandchildren to grow up in? You know, it has to be a better place than this. It really does. And coming from health sciences and medicine and being in academic medical centers before I got an education, I tell people that for 25 years I've seen my share of death, dying, and suffering in communities and hospitals. And I came to realize that education could be one of those things that could, you know, change all of that. And so now that I'm not so, you know, doe-eyed about that, I see that the education system is what really needs to be changed in that sense, to something that's more responsive to the needs of humanity. You know, we have an education system that anesthetizes children. We need aesthetics to wake them up, you know, and go from there. Okay?
Just something to add. Whenever I think about education, when we had the just community meetings right after the election at the El Centro de Igualdad y Derechos, there were so many parents saying that their kids were being bullied by other people in their schools and saying to get out of the country, to go back to Mexico. And these children are U.S. citizens. And so the education that they're receiving, what they're reading about the history of the United States, is that the United States has always been white. That it was the United States who, it was the white United States who won the World War II. And so you have all this the identity of the United States is white, when Hispanics and other groups were present in the formation of this country since its beginnings. And so in the immigrant community, the second generation of migrants, the one who came originally, the ones who are actually U.S. citizens here, they don't have a sense of belonging. A lot of them don't have a sense of belonging, that this is their country, that the United States belongs to them, because that history is not there in the textbooks, and they don't. The United States doesn't have. At least from the community that I work with, the Hispanic community, largely Hispanic, they don't see Hispanic leaders in history to look up to when we were part of World War II, World War I, every single of its wars, and I think one of the major directors in NASA is Hispanic, and those leaders are not in textbooks, and so it's really important to acknowledge that so many people played a part in the forming of this country.
Thank you. Thank you. Samia.
I have a question for you. How do we come together as a community of activists and academics and professionals to push the humanitarian agenda at the United Nations forward in our U.S. policy?
Yeah.
Because we as Americans think of the United Nations as agendas and resolutions that affect the rest of the world that have nothing to do with us, yet we find we're probably one of the biggest violators of human rights in the world. And we perpetuate human rights violations and support human rights violations and occupations around the world. What do we do as Americans to change that? We have an advantage of having the United States, the United Nations on the ground in this country, but we don't utilize it to the best of our interests and the interests of the world.
I'm glad you asked that. You folks answer it, but as the chair of the United Nations Association for Albuquerque, who is seeking members and collaborators all over, we have some cards here, she just asked a heck of a good question.
Well, I'll jump into the pool. You know, it's funny that, again, we have to look at history, and we'll see that, you know, since the broken promises is a phase of reconstruction, we've had this notion of white supremacy that has basically won the Civil War and taken over politics, then and now. And in that sense, they're really not interested in international global issues on so many levels. In fact, when you look at all of the top international treaties that exist in the world, and there are dozens of them, the United States has only ratified and signed 3 of them in all this, in these last 50 years or so. Only 3 of those, and one treaty they signed in 1964, but didn't ratify until 1994. You know, the Surrey Treaty, you know, the covenant on eliminating racial discrimination in the world. And it has a very broad impact on civil rights. It goes beyond our civil rights in this country, how we do these things. So this notion that Rosemary and I have been talking about is a great idea, you know, of trying to make schools human right friendly schools and introducing into the curriculum. We did something similar with this in public health when we talked about, you know, breastfeeding and other types of things. So we have to integrate that into the language of the everyday people in that sense. And when you look at the United Nations system, you'll see that the biggest problem exists with the Security Council, the Big Five. You know, the United States wants to increase its hegemony and practice and power over all the other nations, and they veto so many useful things. But since the development of the United Nations has begun, when you look at back to 1948 and look to now, you see that the most important work comes out of the General Assembly, the bodies of nations of the world, and they're the ones that's doing all the great work. And putting forth the committees and the ad hoc groups and strategies to implement things. If more people knew about some of those things, they would push those agendas also too. So it's going to be it's going to be a timely process, but I have to have some hope, and I think it can be done. But we have to get people to think beyond that. When I taught a class in environmental psychology, I found this chart that maps out on time and space how individuals view the world, you know, over a time span. And when we look at this one axis, you see that most of the data points are surrounded around individual, then family, then community. you know, within a period of 1 year, say, to 10 years, okay? When you look at that same continuum, you see there's an outlier way over here, all standing by itself, and that's global. Very few Americans think about global issues, you know, and the intersectionality and the holistic issues that bring us all together. And so this is a great time to bring about a new birth in many ways. We just have to have the courage and the faith to maintain it and stick with it and pass on what we know to the groups behind us. You know, and I tell the students right now, okay, you know, get ready to accept the baton because this is a race and we're going to pass it on to you. So you need to have the skills and the attitudes and the abilities to make this work, because when we all do good, we all do good, you know. And it has to become part of America's first language. It has to be more than just the individual and what property is, you know. But people have been normed into that through the educational system and not really understanding the Constitution, some of the things. There's some great things still in those documents that we can use to our advantage.
I love using those things. In fact, CERD, by the way, Article 7 of the Convention for eliminate all forms of racial discrimination, commits the state parties. And this is one the U.S. ratified. Everybody bellyaches about the ones we haven't ratified. We don't carry out the ones we have, and we ought to be holding us to it. Article 7 says that state parties will teach their civilian population about human rights. The Universal Declaration, the human rights in CERD, and that they will do it at every level, not just the national level, but in the schools. In other words, we can walk into our school board and say, the good name of the United States is in your hands in regard to Albuquerque Public Schools. What are you doing to uphold the promise made by the United States in Article 7 of CERD? Can we talk? I'd like to not do it all by myself. I'm short and old. Where? Oh.
My question actually goes back to something we were talking about before, and I hate to get off this topic. I hate to get off this topic. I mean, I just as soon ask my question later.
No, well, go ahead, because
Okay.
I'm going to have you in small groups very, very soon.
Okay, so here's the thing. I was placated hearing that Albuquerque police are instructed not to turn over undocumented people to ICE. However, then I heard about this transfer station, and I don't understand that at all, but somehow everybody ends up at a transfer station and there's ICE there.
Yeah.
Anybody know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
I'm not sure what you mean by transfer station.
to the jail.
To the jail, so the Metropolitan Detention Center. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So a couple of years ago, the Metropolitan Detention Center stopped honoring ICE holds, ICE detainers. So ICE would issue a detainer on a particular person who was incarcerated at MDC and say, when this person's up for release, don't let them go, let us know. And due to great advocacy by El Centro de Igualdad de Derechos and other organizations, MDC stopped honoring those ICE detainers and holds. And as far as I know, that has not changed, except that does not mean that ICE doesn't necessarily have a presence there. And I don't know if others on the panel are more aware, but while MDC may not be honoring those holds, it may be that ICE still has access to people and is screening them and is apprehending them upon release. Until 2 years ago, it was the common practice that MDC would hold people. As for the ICE office in Albuquerque, there's one ICE facility in Albuquerque. It is not a detention center. It is only a very short processing center where people are transferred down to the El Paso processing center. So anyone who's apprehended in the Albuquerque area will be processed through the ICE Albuquerque office but then put on same day on a bus to El Paso. So I'm not sure if that's what you're thinking too in terms of transfer center. The way that the Albuquerque ICE office operates is a little bit like a transfer center in terms of apprehension, detention, and very quick transfer to El Paso.
I'd like to get some clarity here, because what I have heard is, and I don't know if this is correct, this was secondhand, and it was probably secondhand from third hand, was that ICE is not able to set up a desk in the Bernalillo County Detention Center, that the county has not allowed that, but that ICE is allowed to have a desk in the Metropolitan Detention Center and to find out who is there. And of course, this is what I'm asking. I don't know that this is correct. I was surprised when you said they weren't there. They were not being held for ICE, but that what I was told was that there's a difference between the way Albuquerque and Bernalillo County is handling the presence of ICE in their detention center. That would sound more believable, because this is what I heard when I went to the county. I went on behalf of the United Nations Association when the county was considering whether to rescind its immigrant-friendly resolution. And what was brought up was a difference between the Metropolitan Jail and the Bernalillo County Jail.
Yeah,
It's just one. It's one facility.
I think it's the difference in the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department versus the Albuquerque Police Department. And I'm not sure how the collaboration goes, but.
Sounds like it's something for the citizens.
Downtown jail, and then versus MDC, which is run by the county.
Okay, so the MDC would be the one where they aren't, but then the downtown jail.
Oh, yeah, I misspoke, sorry.
Okay. Well, it's one of these, again, informed citizens need to find out, don't we? Okay, I'm told we're supposed to wind up, but before we do that, since we're not going to be able to totally break into small groups, I would like everybody here to spend a couple of, what should we say, 5 minutes talking to one person you did not come here with, and generating between you. What's caught your attention in this? What do you feel like looking at more deeply or doing more? In other words, is there a little spark of energy cooking in you based on what you've heard about next steps? So everybody find one person to exchange with, and then we'll hear from you. Just hang on to it, because we're going to let them read. Okay.
Our problem still is that we deal with retributive justice and punishment. Let's start moving towards restorative justice and healing. You know, that's the frame of consciousness that we've got to start working from. Everything is about punishment in this country. You know, I spent my medical internship inside a prison system. It gave me a great insight to a lot of issues. The fact that many people inside the prison system were not sociopaths or psychopaths, but they were there because they didn't have much of an education.
Okay. Sure.
They didn't have jobs, they didn't have health care.
Okay.
And
That's true.
punishment was not really the answer in many ways.
Okay.
You know, so we need a new mindset.
And they set me up with these people where they brought in drug safety dogs each week. We were treated as criminals. We had one preacher who was state prison.
Wow.
Scared street
stories.
Yeah. I came out much worse.
Well, it's like Hoffman said, it's sort of institutionalized behavior, stigmatization. You know, the state is strong enough, you start behaving like a maniac. Well, you know, it is. I mean, one of the reasons why.
This gentleman has a question about Haiti. This is John Paul Weaver, who's spent a lot of time in Haiti. This is Jamal, Jessica, Brandon, and Daniel. Jean Paul.
Wonderful, nice to meet you. I wanted to let you know that my pronouns are her, hers, and
Sorry
she.
about that.
That's okay. It's okay. It happens a lot. I'm very aware that I passed for male. I had a question about the 55,706 patients who lost their temporary citizen status because of the actions of the Trump administration, and especially in regards to the UN, what action is going to be taken to account for cholera being dropped in our country and the ongoing rapes of our citizens and peacekeepers, who most of them I saw were Brazilian, imported from Brazil when I was there after the hurricane. I saw most of them in Ohio, in the southern part of Haiti, and I would like to know, like, understanding that that is happening there, but then we have this crisis of refugees in America that's not being spoken about. The refugee crisis is always projected as this issue that is everywhere else but here. And if you could direct me to a place or if you know of initiatives. Yeah, that's my question.
I have not denied with the status, and we have not seen it that we should law center refugees from Haiti. It's because we've got a large population of people that have experience directly with those.
Okay. I know a lot of them are fleeing to Canada, and they're hiding in the Olympic Stadium in pretty inhumane conditions currently.
Folks in Florida International University
Okay.
have had some experience in refugees in Haiti.
Okay.
So I can't think of any of the names right now, but there's some people down there that do programs and donations and work with some interventions. So I would say over to the page from Florida International University.
Florida International University. Where is that based?
Miami, Florida.
Miami.
Miami, Florida.
Okay, and that's a big. I have family out
African
there.
Studies program also too. There's some people there that work with some of the issues today.
Thank you.
I can't think of any names offhand right now, but I did meet someone about 2 years ago.
Florida
Florida
International.
International University. You see, that's another part of the history that is often forgotten. When Haiti became independent, this country basically, and France basically, forced Haiti to pay back billions of dollars in reparations.
20% of France's economy is
Exactly.
Haitian.
Related to that. Exactly. So it's great.
America.
Okay, friends, we need to report out. Hello.
Indigenous person from Haiti, and he sailed to Cuba.
Everybody.
Like, you know what? The Spanish are doing X, Y, and Z. Better be prepared because I'm
Hello, hello.
right now where I'm from. And I'm telling you,
Time to share.
they wind up executing and killing you.
Time to share.
Bokman, Bokman.
So,
So try and go to International University.
Michael, could you do the note-taking
I'll be here.
and Callie go around to get people's reports?
I guess I'll go sit down.
You've got the mic. Okay. We need just a short shout out from each group, each double, as to what you think, what you want to tell the rest of us happens next. Okay. Callie, just don't wait for them to, don't wait, just go up and put the mic in front of dyads.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got it, a big paper right there, yeah. I want you, okay. Write it down.
Guess I'm not
Michael will
sure
write
what
it
is,
down, and Callie will take your statements. Okay.
So do you want to know what we talked about?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it was kind of a one-way.
Attention, please. We have your attention, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was kind of a one-way deal where I shared that I'm continuing the motivation to try to solve the problem of deported U.S. military veterans. The U.S. military uses non-citizens in the military, and then when the veteran gets in trouble with the law, they're subject to deportation. And this has been happening a long time, but it has increased in recent years because of the anti-immigrant climate. There is a bill in the U.S. House, H.R. 3759, that would require the military to naturalize non-citizen recruits while they're in training. So by the time that they're discharged, they're already citizens. So
sounds like a plan.
I hope people will help encourage our congressional delegation to support H.R. 2759.
Okay, and this will be in the shout out from this session. Okay, let's get another.
Yes.
Hi, we spoke about the need for all these untold stories to get out to a bigger, wider audience and to tell stories not just to the choir. And how can that happen? And really, ultimately, in some kind of a truth and reconciliation process about our history so that we can move beyond it and move on to something new.
Sounds good.
I just wanted to add to what Charles said before about veterans that have been deported or being deported. If anybody's interested, please come to our Veterans for Peace meeting, and we can talk more about it. It's on the 9th of next month, second Monday of every month. Thank you. Right here.
I just wanted to say two things, and then the first one, I just wanted to repeat the question that I asked the panel, and I wanted to do it publicly in case someone else might have some information. My concern, my biggest focus right now is the 55,706 Haitians who are going to be deported or will be refugees in the next few months due to the Trump administration's actions of revoking their temporary citizenship. They were living in America because of the aftermath of the earthquake. And looking at the UN's actions, which could definitely qualify for terrorism and genocide through dropping cholera in our water, and not claiming any accountability until about 9 years later, and the current crisis of the UN peacekeepers who are raping a lot of our women. I specifically want to know what action is being done, possibly within the UN, to help these people here in America. And then a lot of them are fleeing to Canada and hiding out there. And then what possible action is being done here in Albuquerque to create maybe a haven for some of these people, and if anyone would know information about something like that. And then also, I have strong ties to ground level efforts in Haiti, and I will be doing a bunch of fundraisers to support the work there, also in response to the fact that there will be a sudden influx of Haitians they have until January. And looking at the aftermath of Hurricane Matthew and the earthquake, 80% of our agriculture was destroyed. So it's likely that a lot of these people will starve to death, and I'm already getting accounts of a lot of our children in different parts of Haiti are becoming thinner and thinner because we just have less food, and there's a really, really, really urgent need to get funding out there, especially USD, because it doesn't fluctuate like the GOOD does. So some ways that you can help me is I teach dance class at Maple Street, Contemporary Voodoo Folklore, and portions of the fee for the class actually go towards my fundraisers. And then also I will be posting GoFundMes, and I'm also in the middle of a campaign raising funds for an orphanage that has 8 locations that is run by a Haitian man, that is a 501c3, and all micro investments will be tax deductible to help him because he's 3 months behind on rent. So if anyone would like to offer me some support in that, you can come and talk to me. My name is Jean-Paul Weaver, and I don't have an official organization yet, but I do work with a lot of official organizations, but a lot of our associates in Haiti don't have any American tax credentials. I am Jean-Paul Weaver, JEAN-PAUL, en français, Weaver, and there's only one other one on Facebook. I
And
think.
Jean-Paul, you will sign in on our guest book or something so
I
that
will.
in the report, and you've got it down there, so that we can connect with you, rather say, that was a really worthy cause I heard about. I wish I knew who it was.
Mhm.
We don't want to do that to you. This is too
Yeah,
important.
well, I'm here.
Good.
And my efforts are not in charity work or donations or causes. It's in actually being completely focused on doing the work. So I want to make that very clear.
Absolutely. You do. Excellent, excellent. Thanks for bringing that in here. This is practical. Okay. Any other reports back?
Anybody else?
Ah.
We were talking about educational materials. We were talking about educational materials, among other things, and the Southern Poverty Law Center will give you free educational materials called Teaching Tolerance, and they do send them to all the schools in the nation, and they are a 501c3 if you want to send them some money for that. But I don't know that the school necessarily disseminates it to the teachers.
Many teachers probably are on their mailing list. I am too. Another resource, and I'll put this in what we send out, is an organization called Human Rights Educators USA, which is a domestic civil society organization that is promoting the human rights education becoming mainstream in the education of our children. And one of the resources that we have with HRE USA is a resource page linking you to lots of available online curricula on various human rights and humanitarian law related issues. So that when someone says, well, we can't afford to get a book on the subject, you can say, well, you could download a lesson for free. And anybody who wants to know more about that, get in touch with me, because I can certainly tell you how to use the resources that are within our HRE USA system. Free is what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Okay. You do look, you had a bit of that. Hey, that's what you can be for our trick or treat for UNICEF Halloween party. The Grim Reaper. I'm the witch. And so thank you very much, everybody, for coming. I think we should congratulate ourselves for having really cared about this stuff, thought about it, and being prepared to act on it. Now, one way to act will be to get the younger members of your family tree and have a little fun this Saturday at the Day of Peace block party, where there will be music, poetry, food trucks, places for kids to play, lots of tabling, and all of it in support of us being together for peace through respect, safety, and dignity for all. Another thing you can do is I have back there on that table a whole bunch of United Nations Association cards. If you join the United Nations Association USA, which is a very, very sort of top-heavy all organization, but you automatically become a member of the Albuquerque chapter. And that means we can sit down together here and begin to do some things about making the important work and the good work of the United Nations more real to people here, especially because so much of it directly affects people here, our indigenous communities here, our land here. And the other is, at the end of October, if you have some family members or friends of the appropriate age, we will have our third annual Trick or Treat for UNICEF costume party on Saturday, the 28th of October, which is the Saturday before Halloween, when we always do it. We will raise a lot of money for UNICEF's work with refugee children, and we'll play and dance, and we'll paint pumpkins, and get faces painted, and do all kinds of silly stuff for peace, justice, and humanity. Yes, right here. So thank you all for coming. Please keep coming back, and hey, go out there and love your neighbor. Oh, oh yes, excuse me, I'm just so glad they didn't. So, dear panel, dear panel, well, my back, I'm always aware of who I'm looking at. Okay, I would like to thank all of our panel, Dr. Martin, Ms. Martin, Brandon Baca, Daniel Vega. That part of me hit the steering wheel 29 years ago. It hasn't been worth a darn all that time. In any case, panel dear, can we applaud this group of people who are working so hard to make our community what we want it to be? You can have the microphone. I won't even take it back.
I just want to thank two people who put tonight together, especially Rosemary Blanchard and Renee Walters. Can we have a round of applause for them? And I also want to thank the Frito Pie crew. That was Sharon Kay, Charlie Kleinhen, Alexander Sands, and then David Dresner helped with the tables. Thank you, David. And Molly Wilkie arranged it all from out of town. Anyway, thank you all for coming. And the Peace Studies interns, Callie and Michael, thank you so much. So thanks for coming, and have a safe drive home. Thank you also to Mike Swick for rescuing us when it comes to audio-visual. Thank you, Mike.